Hey everybody, it's Kevin Patterson from Poly Role Models. I want to talk a little bit about media representation. I mean, it's a focus of my work. Sort of the difference between media representation and the way polyamory actually is that like a lot of our mass media representation, since it's done by outsiders, since it's done by monogamous folks who are looking to sell, magazines and ad time and so on, it's focused on telling the story that they want to tell and not really the story of what it actually looks like. And because they're telling the story that they want to tell, it's focused on making it palatable for the viewers that they already have. And so that's why a lot of the media representation, it's so white. It's so cisgender focused. It's always straight men and bisexual women. It's always people who are thin and conventionally attractive, able-bodied, neurotypical, educated, well-to-do. And the media representation often avoids relationship structures that you can't really explain in a single sentence. That's why they focus on closed triad. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with being in a closed triad. There's nothing wrong with wanting a closed triad. But it's honestly one of the most difficult relationship structures to either create or to maintain. And it's not an ideal match for most of the people who seek it out. But because it's easy to show, and it's easy to show a close triad as an established couple who adds a single person to their relationship dynamic, and because the representation shows that so much, a lot of people come to polyamory or come to consensual non-monogamy seeking that out when really it's not an ideal match, and it leaves our polyamory communities full of jilted exes of broken triads, and that's why there's a really strong community backlash to people who are seeking out closed triads. The relationship structure is not the problem. It's just that there's a lot of inherent power imbalances that media representation isn't going to show, and that's why there's a community backlash. And community in general is something that media representation doesn't show. I mean, if they're trying to tell a story, they're going to find that close triad. They're not going to find a community full of people doing their own thing in a bunch of different ways. So, there's so many different relationship structures that exist, and the media doesn't really show that stuff. And so, because it's not really easy to explain, something like solo polyamory gets passed off as just dating around, and asexual polyamorous get confused for people just making new friends. And it's something that just gets completely lost in the sauce. It's the reason why we need to have our own representation. The reason why we need to tell our own stories, and not particularly for people on the outside looking in. We don't need to make things palatable for monogamous folks who don't understand polyamory. What we should be doing is telling our own stories, telling our true stories from our own perspectives, and letting people who need that perspective, who need that validation, who need those resources, who need that community, hear what we have to say about ourselves and decide whether or not they fit in or don't. It's the reason why when I wrote my superhero, when Alana Phelan and I wrote our superhero books, we had polyamorous characters, but it wasn't focused on polyamory. We were telling real superhero stories about people who fit these identities. They're informed by these identities. They're not defined by these identities, and we don't lose anything or gain anything by them being polyamorous. It's just who they are and how they move through this world. And that's what happens when you're just trying to tell real stories about people, as opposed to trying to focus on a specific narrative and then forcing humans to fit in that box. And that's a lot of what the media representation of polyamory is. And that's why it looks away. And that's why it doesn't serve the people that it showcases. It serves the people who are looking to watch the freak show, who are looking to see people outside of the normative viewpoint. And that's sort of what we need to get away from.